How are we doing there, boys and girls? Manthieus here, welcome back to another video. So today we're going to take a little bit of a look at cooking. Cooking is obviously a secondary profession, and so every single one of your characters can in theory pick up cooking. And in the War Within, it looks like at least one of your characters will most definitely want to get cooking leveled up. And there's a few reasons why, but for the most part, we're doing the same sort of stuff you've kind of always expected. You're going to make some basic food buff materials. It's going to give you some secondary stats, some main stats. Feasts are a thing once again. This is going to be where we're working towards making the feasts. Cooking was only just really sort of fully implemented on the beta. There is still some tuning, there is some polishing to do, but now we have actual reagents and we're able to start to play with it properly. This has given us the indication that cooking is kind of a Russian doll style profession, in terms of the fact that your basic snacks and quick and easy foods become reagents for the slightly more detailed foods, and those slightly more advanced foods become reagents for your sort of big boy buffs. You can see all of one thing goes into another, which goes into another, which for me thematically makes sense, right? A feast for me is a multitude of many different dishes all put on one big platter. In the days where you used to just be able to take X amount of basic raw materials to make feasts, it wasn't particularly interesting for me. We do still play around with a few vendor reagents here, there and everywhere, but for the most part, it's meat and it's fish. This is going to pair up very nicely if you also enjoy doing some fishing from time to time. Let's talk about the ingredients for a minute. We do have the choice as a cook this time to use some mycobloom. Now, mycobloom is technically a herb, but thematically it's a mushroom to be more precise, and so hence why we use it quite heavily in a lot of cooking. We did a little bit of a test to see how we get to skill 100 on stream today, and it was apparent to me quite quickly that one of the actual optimal ways of leveling it is actually to go using herbs, ignoring the fish and ignoring the meat. But we'll see if it stays that way. What we're actually going to do, though, is instead of using lots of different types of fish and lots of different types of meat and lots of different recipes, we're actually just going to take most any single fish and we're going to fillet it, and we're going to get fish fillets out of it. And we're going to do the same with the meat. We're going to take pretty much any different type of meat, and you're going to smush it down, and you're going to portion it out, and you're going to get steaks. Quantity of these you get does depend slightly on your cooking skill. So pushing this to max as fast as possible is probably not a bad idea if you're trying to get sort of the best results from cooking. And then, for the most part, you're going to start building up some basic stuff. You'll see the entry-level snacks are going to use your fish fillets. They're going to use your chopped herbs. They're going to use your basic portion steak. And then these become the materials for everything that follows on after them. There's not too much other than that to really say about cooking, to be honest, but a 2-minute video on this probably doesn't do it justice. There's probably only one other thing I can really sort of point out that is a nice to have with cooking this time around, and it's hearty meals. This is instantly unlocked as soon as you hit skill 100. And with it being instantly unlocked, it's going to be something that people are going to want to get their hands on, because this is basically your alchemical flavor pocket mechanic from Dragonflight. For those that aren't aware, your alchemical flavor pocket basically meant your well-fed buff would persist through death. Quite a big advantage if you are sort of progressing. If you're pushing higher keys or you're progressing on a boss, every time you die, having to reapply that well-fed buff can get expensive quite quickly. Hearty meals will allow you to condense 5 of your favourite meals. This does include the feasts, at least at this point, to create a version that is sure to keep you full. Hearty meals will persist through death and are able to be shared amongst your warband. Now, we had a little bit of a discussion about this on stream today, because there's actually a 5-to-1 ratio on these, which I think is a bit brutal. You're going to have to put 5 feasts in here to get 1 feast that persists through death. Let me know your thoughts on that. We quite quickly came to the conclusion on stream that that ratio of 5-to-1 is quite aggressive and quite brutal. Realistically meaning you'd have to be churning through 6 of them normally, dying very frequently before these become useful to you at all. I think personally they could do better to make it use more artisan's acuity. but make it so that it's a 1-to-1 ratio. You put one in, you get one out, but of course you can't do it all too much. You can only do it as far as your artisan security allows you to. The way that this works, once you put them in, let's say you were making some mycobloom risottos for your agility buff. Once you put some mycobloom risottos in here, it will spit out a hearty mycobloom risotto. And this is how you'll be able to keep track of which ones are going to give you the well-fed buff that persists through death. At the moment, it doesn't really work particularly well on the beta, but of course this is the early testing stages. These things get sort of solved and fixed soon, hopefully, if everything goes to plan. But this is kind of quite cool. It's not obviously cool if you are the kind of people out there farming those flavor pockets, but it is nice that every player can now quite easily get access to this sort of mechanic without too much trouble. Apart from that, there's not too much else to say. No spec trees to talk about with cooking. We do have a single cooking hat and a cooking tool. I believe Inscription is going to make our rolling pin again, and I believe Tailors are going to make our cooking hat for this. And so we will have to see just how this turns out from a sort of profitability standpoint. I've always believed that you can make quite a good amount of gold with cooking. It's odd, a lot of people assume that because everybody can make their own food that everybody does, but the reality is that most people don't. Most people will buy their food off the auction house, have some other smart cook spend the time getting the materials, putting it all together. And now that the sort of Russian doll style system of basic materials going into snacks going into sort of higher tier, and then the higher tier materials going into the top tier feasts. This means you can probably squeeze a little slither of profit in each step of the process, and it should mean that those that are quite savvy with their crafting costs and focus on getting their materials nice and cheap should be able to see some success with cooking. But I'll leave it there for this video, boys and girls. Let me think what your thoughts are on cooking as it stands right now. Jump onto the beta, have a little bit of a play with this yourself if you have the option to. As like I said, this hearty meals I think is the big selling point for it for most, meaning that everybody is going to want to do cooking on at least one of their characters, and quite quickly. That's my initial thoughts. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it, boys and girls. Consider subscribing if you're new around here, and I'll catch you all next time. Peace.